I can't imagine going through life without knowing who the creator of all things is. I think that when you really feel that you're where God wants you to be, it's there's nothing better than that. There was some serious bumps in the road, it was hard times. As I look back on those days, you can just see God's hand in it all the way through. And He Himself will restore you, confirm you, strengthen you, and establish you. Your life is a mist. My name is Kevin Johnson, and I'm 64 years old. I was born in northern Minnesota, small town. There's about 500 people in the village that I grew up in, and 26 kids in my graduating class from high school. I moved to Porto, Portugal 6 years ago, and this is our home, and we absolutely love it here. I'm married to Janelle, 42 years, love her dearly, and we enjoy doing life together. We say that to each other all the time. And 2 girls, pushing 40 years old, amazing. I'm getting older, I'm feeling it. And I have 4 grandkids, 2 boys, 2 girls. They're living in Oregon right now. Like I said, I was born in a small town in northern Minnesota. The winters were cold and the summers were hot, and there was about 1 billion mosquitoes, and I absolutely loved it there. I thought it was God's country until I moved away. Then I realized that it wasn't. But it was an awesome place to grow up. My parents loved me, I felt, and they married their whole life. I was raised in a home that knew Jesus. I was raised in a small church, Lutheran church. Went to Sunday school. There was 4 or 5 kids in my Sunday school class, but that's okay. It was good. I knew who Jesus was. And through my teenage years, though, it was kind of difficult. There's nothing to do in a small town, except when you get a car and you start driving around, you end up partying a lot. We used a lot of alcohol because there's nothing else to do. And I believe that God had His hand on me that whole time, saved me from a few things. And after I graduated from high school, I realized that this isn't for me. I knew that I had to get out of town. I knew that I had to do something else. And I think that was just of God. So my brother lived in Oregon, and he flew to Minnesota, and we drove my hot car out west, and I moved everything there and got a job and met my wife at a bar. She was standing by the cigarette machine, and I got the courage up to talk to her, and went on a date the next week, and it was history. I knew I was going to marry her after our second date, even though I had to ask her 3 times, but that's okay. That's a long story too. I don't know if you want me to get into it or not, but she is just getting done with a divorce. Her divorce papers were signed, I think, 6 days before we met. So you can kind of imagine she was a little bit apprehensive. But she met Jesus a few months after we started dating. It was amazing because God took me away from her for a couple weeks. I went back home to visit my family, and when I was gone, a couple of her friends came over and shared Jesus with her, and she accepted Christ. And when I got home back to Oregon, she basically told me that our life has to change. We have to do things differently. And I knew that that's what I wanted. I knew as I grew up, I knew who Jesus was, and I knew that someday that I would live for Him. And that time was it. And so we went to a church, Baptist church called Hinson in southeast Portland, I think. Went there once. They had an altar call. I went down front, accepted Christ. It was really funny because we never really went back to that church. So I guess that church was for one reason. It was just for me to make that public commitment to the Lord. And then we just found a church that fit us and raised our kids there. And it was awesome. We just enjoyed doing life together and raised our 2 girls and had a really good job. Worked for a construction company for 31 years. Retired there at the age of 50, which was a blessing, which was totally of God. I always said that work gets in the way of things that you really want to do. And Jan and I just enjoyed doing ministry. We, at our church we were going to at the time, we did short-term mission trips. We kind of ran the mission short-term teams, kind of ran, and we sent out 8 or 9 teams a summer. And we also had a heart for marriages. We did premarital mentoring, which turned into mentoring married couples that were having little bumps in the road, having some issues, which we just totally enjoyed. It was so hard to give that up when we moved to Portugal. But God had his timing, and so it was, it's good for us. But in moving to Portugal, to me, it wasn't hard at all. It was more really weird than hard, because it's something that just is not us. I mean, both Jan and I are, we love to travel. We're adventurous in that way, but we're also very settled. I mean, we were going to retire. We were going to die in the home that we were in. We loved it there. We loved our home. Jan loved her garden. And so, but when it's of God, both of us felt at peace, very, very much at peace. And it was actually really fun. It wasn't difficult at all. And so in that aspect, I think that when you really feel that you're where God wants you to be, it's, there's nothing better than that, because there's just such a peace that you have that it was an easy choice. Now, there was times in Jan and I in our lives, and mainly, when our kids were teenagers, there was some serious bumps in the road. I mean, it was hard times. And, our youngest daughter, 8th grade, developed an eating disorder, and she struggled with that for 4 or 5 years. And we were just thankful that it started when she was in our home. That we were there. We had a little bit more control, rather than when she 28, 22 or 23, you don't have as much control over their lives. But it was just an amazing time. And I remember Michelle sitting in the middle of our stairs with Jan, just crying, and she said, "I want to get better." And at that moment, you can just tell that she went into a program at a hospital where I took her every morning. She was there all day, and I picked her up at night for 13 weeks. And she really, really thrived in that. Not that it was easy. It wasn't easy at all. I mean, she struggled for many years. But I believe she's healed now, and she's doing awesome. And so, but that just drew Jan and I together, and it drew us closer to the Lord. And as I look back on those days, you can just see God's hand in it all the way through. It is amazing how, as we walk with the Lord in our everyday lives, through struggles, through suffering, and matter of fact, we're talking about in 1 Peter now about be prepared to suffer. 1 Peter 5:10 talks about you will suffer. And when you are go through the suffering, that Jesus will be there, and he himself will restore you, confirm you, strengthen you, and establish you. And we just claimed that, and we just relied on him, and we drew closer together as a family, closer to the Lord. And so the teenage years were tough for our kids. And our other daughter had a drinking problem, and 6 years ago, I think it was 6 years ago, she went into a rehab for 30 days and she's clean. She hasn't touched a drop since, and she's thriving. She's doing awesome. And to me, that's just 100% God thing. When we visited her one time, there was a lady there that had been in a rehab 5 different times. And, for somebody to go through that one time and to really be able to walk away from the addiction and just trust in the Lord, and there's nothing better than that. You can just see God's hand in it. So, yeah, life is it's not easy. There's things that we go through that strengthen us. There's things that we go through that draw us to Him, and they're for a reason. They're for a purpose. And you just have to trust in the Lord.